I've been thinking about something that doesn't get talked about much, at least not in a way that feels honest. It's those seasons where nothing is breaking, but your pace has shifted. So if you think about, you're still working, you're still praying, you're still showing up, but the progress that you used to isn't showing up. If you're wired to be responsible and disciplined, that change feels like it comes with a cost. It raises this quiet little red flag in your mind. You don't melt down, you don't overreact, but somewhere underneath you start thinking about things. You look at your habits, you revisit conversations, you pay attention to your own motives a little more closely. This is not something super loud. It's more like something you feel in the back of your mind. Did I drift without noticing? Am I not pushing hard enough? Is this what happens when you ease up? I don't think most of us would say those words out loud, but they're there. When you care about stewardship and you've built your life around faithfulness, you get used to a certain type of movement. You pray about what's next, you make a plan, and you act on it. Over time, you start to expect that effort and obedience is going to translate into forward motion. Not perfectly, but often enough that it feels normal. So, when forward motion slows down, even just a little bit, it can feel like something's off. And it's really interesting how subtle that equation becomes. We would never, ever say out loud that speed equals blessing. That sounds shallow. But I do think we relax more when things are growing. So when doors are open, when you've got more opportunities, when there's visible evidence that whatever it is you're building is actually moving forward. There is something very, very reassuring about momentum. It makes you feel like you're in step. When that momentum levels out, the quietness that it brings can feel heavier than you expected. And it's not scary, it's just unsettling. If you're used to carrying weight well, you're not afraid of work. What gets uncomfortable is the sense that your output isn't translating the way that it used to. So you're still consistent, but the acceleration just isn't there. And because you take your calling seriously, you don't shrug that off. So what do? Well, you look inward. You pray with a little more focus. You tighten things up. Sometimes that's appropriate. There are seasons where we do need to adjust, but I'm not sure every slowdown is correction. I've been sitting with this idea that sometimes it might be something else, sometimes a lot quieter and a lot less obvious. We tend to think a lot about trajectory, about our progress, about the impact that we're making. I do, for sure. I don't want to waste time. I don't want to coast. I want what I'm building to matter. So when things aren't expanding, my instinct is to assume, hey, like there must be something wrong. And yet, I don't know that God feels the same urgency about speed that I do. That's really uncomfortable for me to admit. I care about velocity. He might care more about depth. And I say that carefully because even that can start to sound like a lesson instead of a lived reality. Depth just takes time. It moves at a pace that doesn't always show up in these measurable ways. There are seasons where expansion is very obvious. Right? My influence grows, things multiply, and those seasons feel energizing because they align with how I'm wired. I like to build, I like to produce, I like to see movement. Then there are other seasons where the pace slows and not collapse. It's just less outward. The slowdown creates space to notice things I might have missed when everything was moving faster. I don't think that automatically means disapproval, and I'm not convinced it's punishment either. It might be something more precise than that and a whole lot less dramatic. Here's what I mean. If you've ever trained physically, you know that you can't stay at full intensity forever. At some point, your body pushes back. And it doesn't push back because training is bad, but because constant acceleration, constant pushing just isn't sustainable. And as a matter of fact, your strength is actually going to start to go away if you don't build any recovery in. I wonder if something similar happens internally. If everything is always expanding and growing, but nothing is settling deeper, you can end up really wide without being rooted. From the outside, that looks very, very strong. Underneath, though, it might be thinner than you actually realize. So when your momentum slows, it could be reinforcement happening where you can't see it. That doesn't make it comfortable. It just reframes it ever so slightly. Maybe the doors that are already open need more steadiness than you realized. Maybe your character has to widen before your influence does. And I don't say that as a neat principle. I say it because I've felt how easy it is for growth to pull on your ego without you noticing it. For people who have been dependable for a long time, these slower seasons feel inefficient. You're used to initiating, advancing, taking responsibility. Anytime you have to wait, that feels very passive. It feels like you're leaving potential on the table. But some of the most important work doesn't look efficient from the outside. It looks repetitive, it looks boring, it looks ordinary. It looks like doing the same faithful things without visible movement. There's also something about pruning that I've had to sit with, and not in a heavy way, just in the sense that not every opportunity is meant to scale. Not every open door is meant to stay open forever. Sometimes growth has to be trimmed so it doesn't turn into extending yourself too much. If everything kept accelerating without interruption, I'm not sure I'd notice what I was losing in the process. Could be family, could be presence, could be my integrity. Those things tend to fade very quietly. And you might think you could handle constant growth. I often think that about myself. But even disciplined people have blind spots. We can't always see the full picture from inside our own ambition. So a slowdown could be protection. It could be a way of adjusting the pace so that your internal life can catch up to your external responsibilities. That idea does not remove the tension, but it does change how you interpret it. When progress is obvious, confidence comes easier, right? The metrics reassure you. Feedback that you get steadies you. All that visible fruit that's coming up confirms that you're on track. When those signals start to go away, you have to lean on something less visible. Trust gets stretched in a way that feels less exciting. Your motives get exposed. You start asking yourself different questions, and not in some crazy way, just quietly. Would I still show up if this never scaled the way I imagined? Am I faithful only when it feels effective? Do I trust God's timing as much as I trust my own drive? Those aren't questions I enjoy sitting with. They're not accusatory. They're just revealing. I think a lot of serious believers don't realize how much reassurance we draw from speed. If things are moving, we assume we're aligned. If things are increasing, we assume we're affirmed. But alignment isn't always loud. Sometimes it feels steady and small and slower than we would choose. And if your identity is tied even a little bit to being productive and dependable, any slowdown can feel like a threat. And not just to your plans, but to your usefulness. You may not name it that way. You just feel a little unsettled and a little unsure. So what do? You add effort. You pray harder. You look for more leverage. I'm not against effort. I'm not against initiative. I just keep coming back to the possibility that not every slow season is some problem to fix. Some of them might be invitations, not to do less necessarily, but to become different in ways that only surface when the speed and pace change. Think about this. Patience doesn't form the same way when everything is working. Humility is a lot easier to talk about than to live when outcomes are predictable. Dependence feels abstract until momentum slows down. We tend to see rapid growth as a sign of trust from God. I'm starting to wonder if being slowed down requires just as much maturity. It might require a steadiness that isn't fueled by visible results. When I talk with strong, driven believers in seasons like this, I don't see laziness. I see sincerity. They want to be faithful. They want to steward well. They want to respond when it's time to move. So when the pace changes, they assume they must have misstepped. Sometimes that's true. But sometimes God just isn't in a hurry the way we are. That's not an easy thought to live with if you feel responsible for provision or responsible for impact, or you're thinking about legacy, if you're aware of time passing. if you carry vision that you believe came from Him. Slower seasons can feel like wasted potential. I've felt that. But what if they're concentrated formation instead? And I say that carefully because even that can turn into a tidy explanation if I'm not careful. I don't want to wrap it up. I just want to hold the possibility open. Think about the kind of legacy you say you want. Not just impact, but integrity. And not just influence, but depth. Those things don't get built at constant speed. They just get layered in, often very quietly, and in ways that don't show up on some dashboard on your computer. If God is more concerned with who I'm becoming than with how quickly I'm expanding, then a slowdown doesn't automatically mean disfavor. It could just mean attention. It could mean that something underneath is being strengthened so that it can carry what's ahead. Now, that doesn't make it easy. I still wake up some days feeling like I'm slightly behind. I still feel the pull toward more movement. I still wonder if I'm missing something. But I'm learning to ask a different question. Not what did I do wrong, but what might be getting strengthened here that I can't see yet. That question doesn't give me a timeline. It doesn't promise acceleration. It just shifts the way I sit in the season. Instead of reading slowdown as failure, I try to hold it as possible formation. Instead of assuming quiet means distance, I leave room for the idea that quiet might mean focus, and not as some slogan, but just as a working hypothesis. Trust in this kind of season feels less like certainty and more like staying put without forcing the pace. Still stewarding what's in front of you, still acting when it's time to act, but not scrambling to manufacture speed just to feel reassured. I don't know exactly which seasons are about correction and which are about formation until much later. That's part of the tension. You're living it in real time without full clarity. So you keep showing up. You keep doing the work that's yours to do. And you loosen your grip a little on the idea that if it's not accelerating, it must be wrong. Sometimes God slows you down. I don't always know why in the moment, but just know that pace isn't random, even when I don't understand it. And maybe, just maybe, the invitation isn't to solve it, but to stay steady inside it and let it do whatever it's doing in you, even if you can't name it yet.